I wanted to get a chance to say hello and thank you for everything, and God bless you. You guys are doing America and little people like me a great favor, and may God be with you, I'm telling you.
All right, good evening, everybody. It's July the 12th, the year 2017. Went to the P.O. Box today and got a letter from Therese, and Therese has been communicating with Russell Landers. He's the last remaining incarcerated Montana Freeman. If you guys don't know who the Montana Freemen are, you're really missing out on some history. It's 26 pages, and it says outline. So I'm assuming that Russell is going to outline for us his story of what happened to him. I think he's been in prison. Hold on, I'll tell you exactly when he was arrested. Russell Landers was arrested on June the 13th, 1996. So that would be 4 plus 17. He's been in prison over 21 years. 21 years Russell's been in prison. He has over 20 years to go. His release date is not until 2040. That's 23 years to go. He's not even halfway done. That's how much they hate him. Never hurt anybody. He doesn't have any victims. Everybody that I've ever heard that's ever communicated with him said he's the most gentlest, kindest person you could ever meet. And they absolutely hate this man for the truth that he spoke. And anyway, we've got 26 pages to read. If you don't want to hear me read it and you want to read it yourself, if you go to yearofjubilee.com, click on the Russell page. Down near the middle towards the bottom is files or letters from Russell from prison. This is the file that's titled Russell Landers RL 26-page outline. You can download the PDF file yourself and read it. If you're driving down the road or walking around the lake and you want me to read it to you, that's what I'm about to do. All right, let's get started. Page 1 has a picture of him and his wife. By the way, they killed his son about 5 years ago, and his wife has disappeared as well. So we don't know what happened to his wife, and his son was murdered, and he thinks they did it. When I say they, I'm talking about the government. All right, outline, page 1. Childhood. Born November the 5th, 1949. 2:39 p.m. Iowa, Charles City, Floyd County. B. Went home to a Debner farm northwest of Allison, Iowa, Butler County, where I was to grow to age 4, 1/4 mile from Vilmer Church, where my father's parents had been confirmed in the German Lutheran tradition. C. I then moved with my family about 4 miles to a farm that my parents rented from an elderly widow, Miss Stauffer. 1. There, in the fall of 1954, I would start school in a one-room school, Coldwater, number. My first teacher, Miss Murfield. Number 2. My mother's father had died before the move to Stauffer's. He was the first person to die close to me. D. In the spring of 1955, March 1st, we moved to a Kramer farm south of Allison, Iowa, on what is known as the Butler Center Road, as Miss Stauffer passed away over the winter. 1. I would then attend elementary school at Allison. My teacher was Miss Darby. In first grade, Miss Darby was introducing us to reading. However, I had been taught to read the same series as Miss Murfield with her 2 first graders, Larry Shutnick and Steer, so I spent a lot of time at the sandbox, as I could already read that book she was teaching. Number 2. In the spring of 1956, I had a string of measles, mumps, and chickenpox non-stop. The last several weeks of the first grade, I was so ill with the measles that on a day when my parents were going to take me to Dr. McLeod, my dad called me and I was unable to get up from the floor. Some say this is why I cannot hear with my left ear. My father expanded into the cattle business, and with difficulties as to the landlord, they bought a small farm southwest of Greene, Iowa, just about 1¼ miles north of where we had lived on the Debner farm. Number 3, at 7 I would move with my family to that Hilton Moss farm in the spring of 1957, March 1st, at which time I was introduced to the school at Greene, Iowa, where I would eventually graduate from high school on 17th of May, 1967. E. All the while I was growing up, from my earliest memories, I would attend church at South St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Greene, Iowa. My father had been baptized in the Lutheran tradition there, as had I, and my mother as an adult, before they were married there. Number 1, as early as I can remember, I attended Sunday school with the youngsters I would grow up with. My sisters, Myrna Jean and Arlene Kay, both younger than I, were there with me as well. There was seldom a time when the church doors were open that we were not there. Number 2, at 7, I and my whole Sunday school class were given our first King James Version of the Bible. It had our name in gold in the lower right-hand corner. I had that Bible all of my life until the events in Montana in March through June 1996. 3. I attended the confirmation classes that are traditional in the Lutheran tradition when I was in 6th through 8th grades. I was then confirmed. My aunts Esther Landers and Edith Rodman Schmidt, my baptismal sponsors, were special guests at a dinner after my confirmation. They gave me a large print King James Bible, which would endure with me until I had nearly graduated from college. Tattered and worn, I retired it and continued with another that I acquired. F. After graduation, not entirely to my liking, as I had wanted to continue ranching and farming, I went to college in the fall of 1967. As I had no experience, I attended Ellsworth Junior College at Iowa Falls, Iowa. While at Ellsworth, I met people who would share many years of my life in one way or another. In October of that fall term, I would spend a weekend with my friend Randy Hayberger and attend a house party with him and others at the home of Catherine Nielsen, where I met my first wife, Becky Lee Kiewit. In May 1969, I would receive the Associate of Arts degree for my successful completion of the coursework at Ellsworth. 2. Manhood. A. On 21st of August 1969, I and Becky Lee Kiewit were married at Nazareth Lutheran Church in Cedar Falls, Iowa, with our extended family and many friends and others in attendance. 1. Shortly thereafter, as Becky continued her education at the University of Northern Iowa, UNI, I worked in local consumer electronics businesses and later for a short time at Hawkeye Steel Company, where they made Pride of the Farm and Universal Farm and Ranch livestock equipment. 2. As Becky completed her coursework, I began my attendance at UNI with ambitions for advances in music as a trombone player and teaching, as well as coursework preparatory for business and somewhat open goals. My education and growing diverse work experience would take me to places only God would know. 3. On Flag Day, June the 14th, 1974, our dear son, Ryan Dean, was born. He was a wonderful gift from above, loved by us and the entire family. As I would graduate from UNI in 1974, we would move to a duplex on Wisner Drive in Waterloo, Iowa. Number 4. Though I had grown up around many cattle, baled many a load of hay, and had in my younger days hoped to continue in that tradition, my son would not, as I put it, have that opportunity. Yet, as it was in my blood to live outside the city limits in the spring of 1977, we would construct a 3-bedroom home at 6637 Wedgwood Road on the south side of Waterloo, in the country just off the road to Dysart. Number 5. And while building that home on May the 5th, 1977, our daughter, Amy Lynn, was born. It was the day that my father and I were roofing the house. Some of her first days, she would slumber in her basket while we sheetrocked the inside walls and continued the progress on the house. Number 6. We were blessed with travels and expanded our awareness of our country. In 1969, we were privileged to travel to Colorado and Wyoming and celebrate Becky's 20th birthday in Colorado Springs. There was a trip to Walt Disney World in 1972. While much of the theme park was not complete, in 1976, we were visitors in Washington, D.C. near the end of the summer, as we had traveled in 1975 to California and seen much of this country then. We were blessed with a glimpse of what made America blessed and a view of what was indeed a view of what was in need of divine hope and intervention. 3. What must we do? A. As I expanded my legal education and life experiences, I did a few things right, some even well, and learned much more from many mistakes, as we, it seems, so often must do. 1. My legal education was transfigured into experiences that can only come, it seems, by jumping in the pond with the alligators and doing one's best to throw out the alligators. A. For some time I worked on solving the problems of others as we sold this to save that, refinanced to buy time for reorganization, working with farmers on an occasion, working a reorganization of 5 Ramada inns that were in trouble, all of which were very enlightening. B. For nearly 2 years I was the real estate broker for the Doane Corporation of St. Louis, Missouri in Iowa, the cutthroat world of real estate, along with the same corporate environment that bore much fruit in learning how to overcome. C. Having overturned a couple of opportunities for going into business in June 1979, myself and 2 others formed Landpack Incorporated, which held Landpack Real Estate Incorporated, Kramer Insurance, and Weber's Feed and Supply, and would later purchase a 400-acre farm and ranch property in northeast Iowa. 1. I secured all the insurance licenses for Iowa so as to be able to administer the Kramer Insurance operation with office help sufficient to carry on the day-to-day. 2. I held the real estate broker's license, and one of the partners was to pursue the goals we set for the real estate company production. 3. Robert Weber continued the operation of Weber's Feed and Supply Company. And 4. We retained tenants of the operations on the 400 acres and cattle herd management. So just to let you guys know, he's done this whole thing in an outline. Similar, you would have like Roman numerals, you would have letters, and at times you have numbers. So that's why you're hearing me read these numbers and letters from time to time, because he's actually written all of his life as an outline. This Landpack organization was made myself and the other 2 principals worth about $3 million each, with approximately 70% equity. Corruption of one of my partners would lead to the failure of the entire operation over a 2-year time period. Though it seemed we were well on the way for fulfilling my goal of financial independence by age 35 and retiring to a 640-acre Iowa farm with my family able to grow and learn in a small-town environment, it was not to be. 4. Moving onward. A. Falling back to things that I already knew, I began to develop a new business with 1. Intervening legally on behalf of others who were having problems, and 2. Starting building myself and others a business with the A.L. Williams Company and First American National Securities. 1. Myself and others began efforts that were inclusive of helping farmers and small business people with countering foreclosures and conflicts with lenders in the courts of Iowa. A. We were on a learning curve, starting off losing in court 7 times and later followed by winning 7 later suits by being better prepared with sound standing prior to entering court. B. Of necessity, we became skilled at utilizing private administrative procedures to secure the interest of those we were intervening for. 2. As time went forward and others joined in business with A.L. Williams and First American National Securities, I secured licenses for making securities, largely mutual funds, for aiding in reaching goals for clientele. I secured A Series 6, B Series 63 state license, and C Series 24 principal license, and would eventually become regional vice president with over 100 representatives and over a dozen managers in 5 offices. B. By 1992, I had opted to form a company for the purpose of aiding the people in our business sphere managing their estates for maximizing benefits for their heirs and the ongoing beneficial interest in their estate for their posterity. Though I was aware that the bar attorneys would find it troubling that they would lose the opportunity for profiting by settling estates for deceased persons, I proceeded with seminars and the follow-up services for organizing the secure estates for the benefit of our clients. 1. Only months following that effort, We were enjoying success as our clients were enjoying satisfaction with the new security of their estates. Bonnie Campbell, Iowa Attorney General, published in all of the major Midwest newspapers that she was suing us for defrauding elderly Iowans. She lumped us together with others who were offering inter vivos of trust and such, even though we had nothing to do with them, nor had any idea who they were. We were ready for a victory. Number 2, none of our clients would even consider a complaint. Finally, after a few weeks, I was invited to meet with Miss Pamela Griebel at the office of the Attorney General in Des Moines. By the strength of the word and all that he has endowed me with, I went with confidence to discuss these matters with Miss Griebel, and with my mini tape recorder on the table next to hers. We discussed their concerns, none of which constituted a wrong of any kind. A few weeks later, I received a summons for an action in the circuit court in Toledo, Iowa, Tama County, which I promptly set in the record my administrative foundation. B. Miss Griebel and her accomplices were successful in badgering one of our clients into letting them represent them in that XREL action, even though those folks were not willing to say they were unhappy with our services in any way. She had knived with a long-standing law firm in Tama County who were able to intimidate those clients. C. There were several hearings in Tama County to no avail, and a number of other developments in my life, some fine and others that proved to be difficult and life-changing. D. In November 1993, after a false arrest which Miss Griebel had manipulated, after I had been forced to make a pressing appearance in Nebraska for a rancher, she had won the ire of the Honorable Tama County Court, and I presented my codical affidavit asseveration and misprision of felony. The judge found for me, and with a strong caveat sent Miss Griebel back to Des Moines with a permanent injunction that she nor any officer, agent, or employee of the state of Iowa dare bring up my name in any action ever again, or if it was learned that Miss Griebel or Miss Campbell had anything to do with it, they would be arrested, spend 30 days in the Tama County Jail, and then be heard to determine why such had happened. That was not posted in all of the major papers in the Midwest. Following that injunction, I was not able to get even a parking ticket in Iowa, and officers in Minnesota, Missouri, nor Illinois wanted anything to do with me. The lawful man on the land, i.e. Iowa, is not surety for the bankruptcy of the United States, nor the state of Iowa. The live people are entirely exempt from the bankruptcy collection set forth as statutes. 3. During the battle with the Attorney General of Iowa, Bonnie Campbell, dirty tricks that I had never before anticipated were leveled against me and my family, and an effort for destroying my domestic family life. A. In the battle with the Iowa's Attorney General's office, agents for Campbell went to my home, as in part I maintained my office at my home, and intimidated my wife and stole 6 large file boxes of client records and reference materials, during which invasion they must have ascertained that my life was upset and could be used against me. B. It later appeared that they had convinced my wife that I was unfaithful and recommended Attorney Craig Ament to encourage her to divorce me, which she secretly proceeded toward. C. Upon returning from doing seminars in Omaha, Nebraska, I was faced with the doors to our home locked and a notice of injunction announcing a cause of divorce proceeding taped to the inside of the front door glass. D. Rather than cause any greater problems for my family than she had already decided to cause, I spent the weekend in a local motel, prayerfully considering the situation, and decided that with all that was at stake, I would not fight her, but rather that I would transfer all of our property and resources to her. So I quit-claimed the home to her as well as all else, and sent the documentation to her. E. I continued to press forward with the efforts for witness and warning through seminars of what we perceived had gone wrong in our country, and proffering solutions through seminars, as well as stating claims for restitution and making radio and television appearances, as well as posting on fax networks, an effort that would quickly stretch all across America. F. I supported my children and did not say anything ever to anyone that put Becky, their mother, in a bad light. It was my hope that I could reassure them that all would work out, and I was committed to their well-being. As it turns out, this was a wise decision, for to this day they have been able to keep the faith in Christ and have confidence in their mother and myself. C. During the summer of 1993, every effort was being made to expand the so-called farm claims across the Midwest and all across America to save the self-sufficient farm and ranch economy from the usurious vultures who were seeking to separate the people from the land and put all food production in the hands of powers bent on the destruction of America and enslavement of the survivors of the Global 2000 genocidal scheme signed by former President Jimmy Carter, calling for the death of 100 million Americans and one-third of the population by the year 2000. We were determined to stand in the gap with the power of the Word, John 1:1-14, that posed a setback for the deadly scheme. 1. Late summer, with no intent, I was pursuing the goal set forth above, and upon scheduling seminar at the Public Utility Building in Rochester Minister Community, I met Dana, who was pressing forward related to the abuse of children and taking of children in Minnesota, making an effort for promotion of naturopathic remedies and sound health nutritional means for better health for the people. A. Dana and I would later that fall marry and double down in our efforts for trying to turn the destruction of our Christian nation around. When I was asked to expand the seminars across all the states united, we put our past experience of networking to the test, and by midwinter had meetings progressing from Maine to San Diego and Tacoma to Orlando. This, of course, raised the bar and sat the forces of darkness against us. B. Dana and I appeared with 6 weeks of programming on the Voice of Freedom at Red Lion, Pennsylvania, hosted by Reverend Jim Nichols' Christian Broadcasting Network, where our message was so well received that his program went from operating in the red to in the black overnight. The bad news, the FCC went into high gear to try to shut Reverend Nichols down. Thanks be to Yahweh, he survived and continued the program until his retirement. C. Scott Edward Hildebrand, 1958 to 2006, and I appeared on the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and on a magazine TV program in Greensboro, North Carolina, the program Around Town, which were very well received by the viewing public, millions, but again brought the corrupt system to the surface, seeking to silence us and punish those who would put us on the air. In Greensboro, half a dozen FBI and IRS agents showed up at the studio that had recorded us and were putting us on the air and demanded, "Where are Landers and Hildebrand?" To which the men who had answered the door laughed and said they had no idea why. They had seen a live rebroadcast on TV at a local motel. Then they demanded the tapes, to which the studio personnel demanded a warrant. Of course the men had none. Then the offer was made to sell them a copy for $300, which they immediately accepted. Had those brilliant investigators watched the entire program, they would have found that they could have ordered the 3 tapes for $29.95 plus $4 shipping and handling. Smile. A still photograph from the Minneapolis-St. Paul film was later used in Colorado for framing me, as if it was a photo implicating me in some bad light in Colorado. D. Dana and I were called by representatives of the 700 Club, and on short notice they asked us to appear with Willie Nelson in their special week-long program related to the IRS. We were in Iowa in the middle of a snowstorm, but we agreed to make that appearance, so we drove in the storm until we were out of it and, through the night, headed for Virginia. 40 minutes from the studio, we called to let them know that we were there and would be ready to make the appearance, to which Ben told Dana they were really sorry, but they could not have us appear as their producer had refused to endorse us as we were too controversial. They had elected to seek our appearance due to the preview of us on The Voice of Freedom. I set forth above how FCC had abused Reverend Nichols there. We simply reworked our schedule and went forward, not too surprised at the block found at the 700 Club. For the truth is a hard pill to swallow for the corrupt system. E. During much of the winter of 1993 through 94, we were invited to spend the winter with Dana and Rosemary Samuelsons in Gilbertsville, Pennsylvania, which we did. We continued our efforts for conducting seminars all across the country from there, and we hatched ideas for further expanding our efforts. In early March 1994, we held a convention where we had invited in Red Beckman as a keynote speaker. At the convention center in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, there we met folks from North Carolina who were anxious to secure help with legal tangles that they were having. We met David Schroll of York, Pennsylvania, and would later work sorry, I lost my spot. And would later work with a number of people there. Later that month, I was appointed circuit judge for the Circuit of North America, and that appointment was registered in York. Notice to W.M. Rehnquist, Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and notice to the Administrator of the Courts of the United States. That same winter, we compiled our manuals for our seminar, America First, Basics of Law, which we would be presenting for assisting the people for securing justice and averting the ravages of collections on the bankruptcy of the United States and the Booch Act states. As this seminar gained in promotion, it brought the ire of those who were steeped in the graft of the corrupt system. F. By mid-spring 1994, we moved to Smithfield, North Carolina, retained for defense of C.L. Gurganis in State v. Gurganis in Johnston County, Smithfield, North Carolina, related allegations of a Ponzi scheme due to the program Friends Network. Dana and I and our two teenage daughters settled in a townhouse home in Smithfield, North Carolina, and established our law office and began encouraging others to continue the presentation of the farm claims across America. Activities in State versus Gurganis, State versus Guerrero, and others soon became a high-profile and brought the retaliation of John Locke, the local district attorney. Others of State, i.e. alcohol law enforcement, ALE, and others of the active Freemasons in that area. I had embarrassed several. Okay, I'm going to stop at the top of page 9. I'm going to stop at the top of page 9. I'll pick up later. Okay, starting at the top of page 9. I had embarrassed several of those people in the early months of practice in their local courts and political circles. It was obvious they had put us on their hate list. They were not accustomed to losing. In the course of the summer, we moved to 215 Coates Road, southeast of Smithfield, a Four Oaks, North Carolina rural address where we were able to remodel the large garage for office space and enjoy the comfort of a 1,200 square foot brick home on the spacious wooded lot. The Johnstons, happy to rent to us as their brother was in prison and the house was a financial responsibility in the absence of someone there to share in the expenses of property taxes and maintenance. Our move to Coates Road came after we had been assaulted and robbed in New York City by a contact, Douglas Najari, assistant DA in Brooklyn, a co-conspirator with John Locke following the summer at Travelodge International at the JFK International Airport the last weekend of July 1994. Our custom van and all the contents were stolen. Our teenage daughters, Dana and Paula Guerrero, were all jailed for a week on Rikers Island. I was jailed in Queen's House for 9 days and all falsely accused in an effort to destroy us as John Locke and others sought revenge. Stolen, we have never been able to recover our van nor any of our private property. The Americans Bulletin produced a front-page article in the fall of 1994 setting forth the assault that we had waged against us by Douglas Najari. and the DA's office in Brooklyn, New York, in conspiracy with John Locke, DA, in Johnston County, North Carolina. In the efforts to frame myself and others, Douglas Najari flew my first wife, Becky, and our 3 children to his office in Brooklyn, where he questioned them at length about myself and our America First Basics of Law seminars, etc. He was frustrated with our daughter when our daughter told him the content of our 3-volume course materials was from the Library of Congress, state and local archives, published books and materials. As he had asked, where did your folks get all this stuff? All in hopes of creating some wrong to use against myself, Dana, and others. In the matter with Najari, my family learned that the then former Attorney General of Iowa, Bonnie Campbell, a New Yorker of Albany, New York, had been conspiring with Najari in the effort to frame us. We were privy for intelligence related Najari's efforts for fabricating an indictment in Brooklyn against me. There was a hearing scheduled in their bogus action against me and Dana and the others in September of 1994. When we attended that hearing, on the record, that old judge questioned me as he asked, "I hear you are a judge, Mr. Landers. Where is your court?" To which I answered, "Wherever I sojourn," without hesitation, and continued, "On the record, you may contact me, the court at 215 Coates Road, 4 Oaks, North Carolina." To which he urgently stated, "I don't think we need that on the record," and I replied, "I am quite certain it is already on the record." The hearing was quickly adjourned. As it turned out, the hearing was deferred for hearing 9 December 1994 before Judge Appleman. In the meantime, we brought suit against the Queens County Assistant District Attorney D. Willis Miller, who was acting against us in Queens County, as the events they were using in the attempt to frame us had actually occurred in Queens County, not King County, Brooklyn. The federal suit was a Bivens action. As it turns out, Najari was able to frame a bogus indictment against myself and Dana Murphy in King County before the 9 December 1994 hearing. This despite the fact that I had never even been out of our vehicle in King County in my life, nor had I ever done anything in King County, New York, even at arm's length. It was all part of the conspiracy for depriving us of our protected rights, acting upon the encouragement of John Locke, District Attorney in Johnston County, North Carolina, and others unknown, which began in the spring and summer of 1994. For December the 9th, 1994 hearing, we traveled to New York City for the hearing in Queens County, knowing that Najari had framed an indictment for something that had never happened, so as to silence myself and others. Once there, I filled our codical affidavit asseveration, misprision of felony, creating an estoppel in Brooklyn, as well as in Queens County. Meantime, D. Willis Miller had filed the suit and summons filed and served on him in the federal district court into the sham in Queens County. So at the hearing, he screamed, "They are filing frivolous papers" in the Queens County matter, to which we objected and clarified that we had done no such thing, and in fact, we had served Miller as a defendant in the suit. Judge Appleman reviewed the complaint and summons and dressed down Miller as she asked, "Mr. Miller, where did you attend law school?" Which she immediately retracted with, "Don't answer that. We wouldn't want to defame a perfectly good law school." "Mr. Miller, you are being sued in the federal courts, and I am entering an order that you will answer this suit without fail, without delay, or I will be sanctioning you for entering this upon this record and for your failure to do so." That hearing, a MAPP hearing, MAP hearing, resulted in a continuance and adjournment. The Brooklyn DA hit squad, led by one Edward Ortiz, was in the Queens County Court and following the proceedings arrested me on the bogus indictment that Najari had conjured up. I had anticipated this and was prepared for my release on bond of necessity. Ortiz booked me in and took me to Brooklyn House Jail to await the hearing. My contact was prepared to attend the hearing and affirm the bond so that I could leave the courtroom. However, when I was to be in court, I was not there. it had been derailed, and I was taken to a dark, largely unused courtroom on an upper floor where the judge was angered by our filing of the codicil, etc., and bound me over with bail for a psychiatric evaluation, which led to confinement on Rikers Island, C-75 for December into March 1995. Knowing that our legal steps taken in New York, the frame-up, was not succeeding, the conspirators went on to contrive a second frame-up in Colorado against myself, Dana, and several others, most of whom we don't even know, and none of whom, to our knowledge, had ever done anything to result in being prosecuted. The bogus charges against us, Dana and I, in Colorado, were attempted theft of up to $15,000, totally baseless. It carried a bond for release requirement of a maximum of $1,500, yet the conspirators in Colorado, Attorney General Gail Norton, Assistant Attorney General Marlene Langford, and Chief Judge Gasper Perricone, whom we were later able to verify and accepted a $25,000 bribe from Norton to get them, and had set the bail at $100,000 for each, Dana and I, anticipating that they could keep us jailed for lack of bond. In New York, the conspirators had been forced to shut down the matter with Najari, as the judge was begging me for a motion to dismiss in the interest of justice, and not allowing Najari nor his associate to say any more on the record. I was to be released, however. They held me and forfeited me to Colorado, which resulted in me suffering a torturous trip via a 12-day mad rush through several states day and night to get to Jefferson County, Colorado, where I was then released within 2 hours. Dana and I would be accommodated in Colorado Springs and shortly in Littleton, Colorado for the summer of 1995. Anticipating motions and with confidence, we anticipated a dismissal of the bogus action in Jefferson County, Colorado. Yet the corrupt conspirators had other plans. Our crushing motions were scheduled for first week in August, but the crooks could not hear them, so they contrived another scheme of psychological evaluation and confined myself and Dana at the state hospital in Pueblo, Colorado for 2 weeks, myself, and 3 weeks Dana. Shortly after we got past the abuse of the weeks in Pueblo, Colorado, we had friends from the AG Society at Abilene, Kansas, who arranged to take us to our home in North Carolina end of August 1995. During the fall of 1995, at our office and our home, we resumed efforts for proceeding on cases that we had been unable to work, reconnected with James Vincent Wells and his brother-in-law for overcoming the legal problems that he had been struggling with, and extended our services for additional inquiries in need of assistance. During the same fall, others whom we had worked with in Iowa, etc., were dragged through bogus prosecutions related to farm claims in the Southern District of Iowa. Those people were targeted just as we had been. Since it was in Iowa, there was never any effort for aggression against me, as the permanent injunction was firm in Iowa. The public was banned from naming me. In October, James Vincent Jimmy was at our office and seeking to resolve his challenges with the IRS. In that meeting, we made phone inquiries to Dr. Tom Smith, as he was a success in matters earlier, and as we reviewed contacts that had been referred to us earlier, we made a call so as to inquire with Leroy Michael Schweitzer in Montana. He was characterized by the media and so-called law enforcement as a Montana Freeman. He indicated that he was so confident that he could resolve Jimmy's IRS challenge. So I and Arvely McLam agreed to attend Leroy's meeting at the ranch in Montana and the first weekend of December 1995, and see if that could solve Jimmy's needs and Arvely's as well. We arranged to drive from North Carolina to Montana in late November 1995 and to have a friend in Kansas who had been to a weekend seminar before to accompany us. We attended the school and were convinced that it would be a viable solution for Jimmy, so we arranged for him and another fellow to attend in early January 1996. In early January 1996, Jimmy arranged for Dana and I and his other friend to fly to Billings and drive out to the Clark ranches to attend the seminar so Jimmy and the other fellow could get the help they were seeking. During our attendance with Jimmy and his friend, We were able to become better acquainted with some of the people in the area and expressed an interest in visiting further at a later date. Note, Dana nor I needed to settle any debts. Thus, we did not seek nor receive any of Leroy's warrants for settlement of any debts. We returned to North Carolina in a rare winter snowstorm. An uneventful trip. Jimmy and the other fellow received several warrants for settling their affairs. During the January 1996, Dana and I and others attended a common law court in Franklin, North Carolina, where we had a case of our own heard, where Jimmy had summoned the people with the IRS who had several properties of his tied up. We were not aware of Jimmy's plans, but on one day in January 1996, Jimmy called and indicated that he wanted to make good on the promises that he had made earlier. That when we made good on efforts for resolving his IRS challenges, he was wanting to see to it that we had vehicles for traveling and conducting our America First Basics of Law seminars. As he was well aware of the losses we had suffered in New York, the loss of our van, and he wanted us to have a means of going forward with our seminars. He invited me to come to Wilson, where he planned to give us a late model Chevy Suburban for our use. I went, and he gave me the truck with the paperwork and everything needed. A short time later, Jimmy called and asked if we could use a motorhome. He wanted us to come to Wilson and look at a friend's motorhome that was for sale. We went and looked. It was very nice, but I thought it sounded like a lot of money, and suggested maybe we should look around. So we went to an RV sales place in Raleigh, North Carolina. We were encouraged to look around, which Dana and I did, for no particular reason other than it looked a lot like the one in Wilson. We found a used motorhome that we thought was a very nice vehicle. So Jimmy went ahead and negotiated with the dealer, and soon told us that he had bought it and that we would pick up the following day, which we did. Late in January 1996, we loaded all of our things we saw we would need to do a spring and summer seminar tour in the areas of North California and later in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and at some point stopping back to Montana for a visit with the people at Justice Township to exchange some information and make good on our plan to visit again. We traveled to Franklin, North Carolina for another session of the one Supreme Court Common Law Court, and then for the continuance of our tour plans. After the session in Franklin, we headed west. When we reached Hays, Kansas, we had problems with the air suspension on the motorhome due to freezing conditions. While we were there, we had to decide if we would turn south and go to Denton, Texas first, or if we would go west and north to Montana. A call to Montana solved the question. We would be welcome at the Clark Ranches and they could accommodate us. So we decided to go there before heading out to California. While at the ranch in Montana, we acquired some computer desks so that we could set up our computers and exchange information with the men there. And then we would leave as a thank you for the hospitality and the meaningful exchange of valuable information. Okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to stop on the top of page 14. When I get back, we'll resume at the top of page 14. As a thank you for the hospitality and meaningful exchange of valuable information, while we were on the ranch, we became grandparents for the first time. Our grandson Alex Michael Landers was born in Iowa. By the 25th of March 1996, we were anticipating others arriving to travel with us to North Carolina to do seminars for about 90 to 120 days. But we had the shock of a lifetime when early that morning Dale, Martin, Jacoby, and Ebert Stanton came alarmed to the trailer where we were staying on the Ralph Clark Ranch and told us that Leroy and Daniel Peterson had been taken by someone when they had gone to the place where they had intended to erect a two-way radio repeater and tower for two-way communications for 150 to 200 miles around the Clark Ranches. No warrant. It had been a kidnap. Sometime earlier, Dana and I had tried to warn Leroy of the suspicious nature of Mike Madsen, as he had a variety of cars and trucks and friends appeared to be some sort of snoops not to be trusted. The cars and trucks had plates from several states, and Madsen was one who came bearing gifts after he alleged to have banked one of Leroy's warrants. He alleged that he had $300,000 liquidated, so he was willing to give them a computer system and some other trinkets. Madsen, later showed up as a witness as an FBI agent who called himself Timothy Healy in the so-called Freeman trial. The so-called standoff started on the 25th day of March 1996, whereupon, with the exception of the two of the younger men who had been placed on watch, we had everyone join us in a Bible study of Gideon and his 300 men, Judges chapters 6 and 7. We prayerfully entered upon the challenge as we saw our odds as similar to Gideon and his men against the Midianites. It is no less a war. 24-hour watches and surveillance on foot and horseback to avert a violent surprise attack for the next 81 days. We found and diverted trails marked for day and night invasion, which we had to be constantly on guard for. With the limited number of us, it became very difficult and tiring circumstance without end. We had airplanes overhead much of the time, and at times threats of invasion on the ground as we were doing our level best to avert a confrontation. We averted no less than 4 attempts by them, FBI, etc., to start a violent event. Even after they shut the electric power off, there was never a time when short supply was a problem. We were in no danger of limitations for the first 100 years, so all of their efforts to cut us off were a nullity, not real. There were so-called negotiations, just a fishing trip on the part of the FBI, etc., in their attempt to take us from our liberty and to rob us and silence us. We had at least 2 people who were attempting to sell everyone else out. Matthew 10:36. After threats of lethal force and intelligence that the Air National Guard at Glasgow was on the ready alert for supporting an invasion, and there were over 20 armor personnel carriers at the Jordan airport ready for an invasion against us, we were under threat that we would surrender on the 13th of June 1996, 81st day, or face lethal force. Dozens of bandits with men without a warrant or any lawful cause were there to see us taken into captivity, robbed of our liberty and property, while the media boasted of the FBI successfully having ended the affair peacefully. Another huge lie. We were gaffed up in plastic cuffs and hauled to the Yellowstone County Detention Center in Billings, Montana, without a warrant for our arrest. No complaint, and the lies of the media and others used to create the impressions that we, the real victims of crime, were the criminals that the media and others said we were. We would suffer over 2 years of torturous abuses. I was healthy and weighed 205 pounds on the 13th of June 1996. When they weighed me as I left Yellowstone County in 1998, I weighed only 155 pounds and looked like a concentration camp victim that I was. The first summer they could not get us to fall for the false process that they were trying to get us to agree to. My wife and I were never indicted. We were added to an alleged indictment by a superseding process in July 1996. While the scam in Montana was not going well, they strategized that they could load me up with more prosecution in North Carolina and added me to another alleged indictment, thereby printing me into a superseding indictment. No one can be added to an indictment by an entry upon a superseding indictment. I nor my wife had a banking transaction in years and did not even know how the bank cited in the process even existed. Never had a single transaction of any kind in them, never indicted. No victim, no complaint ever. I was never notified of the matter in North Carolina until I was beaten, bloodied, and taken without a hearing from Montana. We later learned it was done via a memo between the U.S. attorneys, all unlawful. That was done on or about the 30th of September 1996, months after the alleged indictment. On the way to North Carolina, I had no idea where I was going. They threw away my contact lenses so I would not be able to read. I had to have some glasses sent to me in North Carolina. Once there in a so-called arraignment, I demanded a determination in foreign law, which is estoppel. They had a fit. I warned the attorney that if he acted in any way a trespass on me or my trust, that I would sue him, which I later did in Wake County. The matter was a total fiasco. There was no actual indictment. There was abundant evidence of their violation of my protected rights, violation of the oath and contracts that the public officials were in violation of. This all led to them producing what was alleged to be a conviction while I was not present. The suit in Wake County was filed, and I served it on John Faney, the alleged public defender, via the U.S. Marshal on the second or third day of their sham trial. He came before the so-called judge in W.M. Earl Britt, and next day with the evidence that he was being sued. Britt acknowledged that evidence of absolute prejudice and ordered Faney to continue for the defense. Total fraud on the process. Sometime later, I was sent back to Montana on private jet after a night over in an outback place near Lansing, Michigan. We landed in Helena, Montana, and I was taken from there to Boulder, Montana, to a small jail where they were confining my wife, and was placed in a large room with Leroy Michael Schweitzer for one night. They were very careful not to let Dana and I have any contact of any kind whatsoever. The next morning we were chained, hauled to Billings, to the Yellowstone County Detention Center jail. Isolated at the Boulder jail, Dana was tricked after they had robbed our daughter Carrie of over $120 for a 30-minute phone call. They tricked Dana by piping a video of attorney Steve Caney of Lexington, Kentucky, speaking of a class action suit against jails and prisons for the outrageous charges being leveled for use of the phone. He was actually on a video played into her jail cell. The result in desperation was for Dana to contact him and to be cajoled into believing that he would resolve her situation with the false charges being leveled against her. She and a friend of our family were talked into a retainer of $125,000, and she acquiesced to being represented ward of the state in the Billings fraud. Okay, I'm going to stop on the page, top of page 17. Okay, picking up at the top of page 17. Caney leveled all kinds of promises, flew into Montana with a staff of assistants, and received Dana with his show into pleading guilty. And deceived Dana with his show into pleading guilty for transporting stolen property across state lines, her computer system, as the paid receipts for all the equipment were in our records at our office in North Carolina. This resulted in her receiving a sentence of time served, as if to justify all the abuses she had suffered, and the raising of the bogus charges in Colorado from abatement, as I had warned it would. She was further abused, transported to Colorado as if a criminal, when in fact she, I, and others are the victims, witnesses to the corruption, and they coerced a plea from her, where she had never violated anyone nor any law. She was sent to a Colorado prison for a couple of months, then to a Colorado halfway house, forced to work. She worked as a flag person on a road construction project for a couple of months before being sent home to North Carolina on a fraudulent supervised release scheme. Initially, her and I were able to speak by phone, and we had friends who saw to it that she had housing and other basic necessities. Our daughter Ashley was there for her, and we were blessed with a bit of peace for her situation. Shortly, the evil system, under threat of more false imprisonment, prohibited Dana from speaking with me on the phone, writing me, or having any contact with her own husband. This gross separation went on for over 3 years. There are many more details that of necessity I am unable to include in this outline. Such evil most of the American people have no idea is going on right here on America. Reverting back to the events of spring 1998, the corrupt system in Montana proceeded forward with the sham trials there. First, they held a sham process against a number of the people who had been living peaceably on the Clark Ranches, Justice Township, prior to the 1996 attack by, in total, over 600 armed bandits, alleged to be some sort of officials, FBI, and others who have never been identified to me. They first held trial with those that were supposed to be less culpable in the alleged crimes. No crimes, no such laws. which resulted in gross abuses in the Yellowstone County Detention Center, as special alleged U.S. Marshals were involved in torture and violent abuses of the victims' witnesses when they would not accept the abuses that were being imposed. Richard Hance was being confined with me, and I witnessed him being dragged down a flight of stairs in chains, beating him, and then dragging him to a closed-circuit TV room in the jail rather than the court for proceedings against him and others. At the same time, I was dragged from the cell by my feet on my belly on a concrete floor, beaten to silence me, and confined in the cell in chains for a time afterward. I'm going to pause here. Okay, top of page 18. For clarity, know this. Remarks in this outline that refer to the bad acts of those federal actors and others as fraud, fraudulent, and no such law, etc., are not simply my statements. They are based upon the facts and the law, and demonstrate in fact that myself and numerous of the American people are the victims of lawless tyranny that has been unleashed on we the people during the 20th century and continue at an ever-increasing pace in the 21st century. Following the so-called first Freeman trial, it was abundantly clear that Edwin Clark had sold out the rest of the people. He had been an active man in the lawful conduct of all others. Yet, as it was his personal account at the Garfield County Bank that was used in the lawful transactions alleged to have been criminal and a fraud in the bogus process, he was the only one who was acquitted of all the charges. This while others who had no part in anything alleged were convicted. He, Edwin Clark, hugged Sherry Shiel Matusi, the Assistant U.S. Attorney for the District of Montana. Shortly thereafter, it became time for the imposters, a so-called judge from Seattle, Washington, John C. Kugenhainer, who they brought off the bench. When the Portland, Oregon imposter James M. Burns could not get the fraudulent so-called Montana Freeman cases off the ground, was to begin their sham abuse and show trial for their media blitz to show we the people that they not stand up for the truth in the presence of Yahweh, the Almighty Creator and Ruler of the universe, or this persecution was what would happen to them. On the day the sham was to begin, I was sitting on the floor in a cell with Leroy Michael Schweitzer as we heard the clangings of the chains and the voices of the several special thugs. As if U.S. Marshals, the door was swung open, and they brutally grabbed me by my feet and dragged me out on the concrete floor face down, and then proceeded to place shackles on my ankles so tight that when I would stand they would break the skin and I would be bleeding from the wounds, a belly chain and handcuffs behind my back. Then I was yanked up and was dragged backwards way down the hall to the mock-up TV room, while I was in excruciating pain, unable to get footing, and the pain in my arms and shoulders and legs was as intended by those who were torturing me. Each and every one of the men, regardless of age or condition, was abused in a similar manner. One had a sizable patch of his hair torn out, leaving a bloody scalp. Another was abused so as to force him to defecate. After one day of such horrific abuses, we all decided to go on a food and water strike. We threw the trays across the room from our cell and stopped eating and drinking, which meant that the length of the sham trial would be longer than we would be conscious. On the 8th day, I began passing out. I remember going out and then becoming aware again. They took me out of the emergency facility at the hospital. I remember being loaded in the vehicle, but nothing about the trip to the hospital. The first I was aware, I had an IV in my right arm and the drip from a bag of liquid. I thought it was the first bag, but in fact it was the fourth. After my blackout crisis, Kugenhainer sent a court observer to witness our condition and take video footage of us and our condition. We looked like concentration camp victims that we were. Thus, he ordered that we be sent to Springfield, Missouri. We did not know of the order, but soon learned as in the night they arranged for us to be removed. As we left, they took our vitals and weighed us. I do remember the shock when I saw the readout on the scale. I weighed only 155 pounds, a 50-pound loss since I had been confined there, and less than I had weighed in the 10th grade. We were whisked We were whisked to the Billings International Airport, and we were placed on a private twin-engine airplane. We flew from Billings to Springfield, Missouri. There were dozens of vehicles with flashing lights. God only knows how many armed people if we posed some sort of danger. And a motorcade drove us up to the prison in Springfield, where we were placed in isolation cells, all spaced out throughout the prison so that we would not have any contact with anyone else. When I looked in the mirror, first one I'd seen in 2 years, I was shocked, as my eyes were black and blue, my cheekbones were as if only bones to match my exposed ribs and skinny arms. We were left there for several days, then presumably after the alleged trial in Montana, were taken out, flown to Seattle SeaTac near Seattle, Washington, to a federal holding prison, where we were again separated, left without word. Rodney Skirdall and I were in the same section. I was informed that I had been convicted of what I did not know. I learned that Dana had been sent to SeaTac as well, and that she was in the same building, different section. I sought communications, and they were granted, so we were able to write. Later, when they wanted to enter sentences, we were together for the trip back to Billings, which would be the last time that we were able to see each other since. After a few days there in Billings, I found myself again at Seattle SeaTac, where I was until I was transported to the Federal Correctional Institution at El Reno, Oklahoma. At El Reno, I was surprised to learn that the entire staff knew me, as my photo had been posted up front as a high-profile prisoner, victim of human trafficking. So they would be alert for my activities and not be caught off guard by someone so dangerous as myself. As one is sent to prison under the presumption of a liability for a charge, accounting term, one needs a discharge for return to liberty, with prayer and the knowledge with which I had been blessed to set out for securing my discharge. With hardly even an outline, I went to the library and on a typewriter structured the necessary special private security with the needed discharge. Later, with aid of others, I expanded the all-inclusive special private security and began to proceed for securing my liberty. We would eventually have the necessary discharge for myself and all the men of Freeman character, women as well. Our discharge conceded by the entire U.S. Supreme Court and all officers, agents, and employees of the entire public system. In 2003, we secured the special private common law copyright of our names and proceeded to contract with the warden and others in the administration of the BOP, which left those actors liable for the unauthorized use of our private common law copyrighted name in their commercial human trafficking scheme RICO operations, as those compelled by contract for specific performance did not cease to use our name in their commercial scheme. We made arrangements for collections as were begun on March the 3rd, 2004, against the warden and his estate. The 3rd of March 2004, the prison system, FBI, and U.S. Attorney's Office in Oklahoma City, all in disarray, flocked to the FCI at El Reno and sought to bully us and try to recover from the lawful collections that had just taken place against Thomas Charles Peterson, warden and oath-taker who was in violation of his oath and statutory contracts for protecting our rights. They reacted by retaliation. They confined some of the men in the hole while they sent myself to the Federal Transfer Center at Will Rogers International in Oklahoma City, with a design to have me transferred to the deepest, darkest place they could find in the BOP. Problem was that I had done nothing wrong, illegal, or unlawful. So after 87 days of isolation at the FTC and a fight in between the warden at FTC and Peterson, they were forced to take me back to FCI El Reno, where I faced a further retaliation by the trespassers, in particular the warden and his captain. Myself and others would face over 25 months in the hole, and then a false disciplinary process as if we had attempted escape. Our legitimate collections were obstructed by force as one of our men sent the abusers after our professional collectors, leaving us without the essential assistance to proceed with collections in lieu of the liability incurred as a result of their unauthorized commercial use of our special private common law copyrighted names. for their own unjust enrichment in their human trafficking scheme. Myself and the others were kept in the hole for the next several months, totaling 24 months, and then trafficked to another BOP location, myself to USP McCreary at Pine Knot, Kentucky, where I was held in the hole another month before finally being housed on the compound. Efforts by my daughter and others through the assistance of Senator Charles Chuck Grassley of Iowa during the 2 years of abuses as a source of oversight intervention proved futile. When his feet were held to the fire, he went silent. Clearly he was not one to question the prisoner bond scheme for high finance, as those abuses were okay with him. Section 4, next. A. At USP McCreary, we were numerous low and medium security people who were there for training employees in lieu of future resettlement of the prison with high security people. There were several people there who I had met earlier at FCI El Reno. As time went on, I soon was introduced to a fellow with similar leanings, Jack, who would share in my position for discharge for liberty from our unlawful false imprisonment. With extensive preparations, we worked with legal counsel for the service of our process for discharge and then release. That resulted in us being placed in the hole in early September 2006. During that time, I would learn of additional procedures that would further the lawful efforts to secure liberation from the prisoner bond liability, as certainly that was the key. 1. April the 7th, 2007. I would have posted a private bond for set-off non-negotiable with the Secretary of the Treasury. That was then the foundation for the presentment of sufficient bond for set-off of the outstanding liability, which was done and completed by on or about the 26th and 27th days of May 1977. As my discharge was secured, I was entitled to the immediate liberty the bad actors set out to bring bogus charges in the Western District of Oklahoma, the matters of 2004, as we entered to liberty without such action. By charging us, they hoped to avert having to liberate me, and that would roll on to many more legitimate liberation proceedings. 3. When they puffed up an alleged indictment, they put out an outrageous CNN news spot for several days showing my photo and other prisoners in orange, as if they had some big bust of an evil plot by real criminals. 4 weeks later, 3rd week of July 2007, 2 green young FBI men came to McCreary to serve an alleged warrant on me. When I offered to settle it on the spot, they cringed and said, "We cannot allow you to do that." I agreed and said, "That's okay. I will take care of it tomorrow." The next day, I sent it back as accepted for value and discharged by registered return receipt, restricted delivery, mail, thus settling the entire matter. 5. Last week of July 2007, they took me by U.S. Marshals transport. I was taken to Oklahoma City FTC Will Rogers International Airport, where I was in isolation for the entire weekend. I was put with an old man who was crippled and could not stand up. He was crawling around on the floor as he had been long before I arrived. I helped him with what I could. I learned much of the abuse he was suffering and the crimes that he had suffered as a result of his political stand earlier. The so-called system is awash with victims of the rampant tyranny. 6. On Monday, the alleged U.S. Marshals took me from the FTC to the federal courthouse in Oklahoma City, where at the very end of the day, after all others were finished, they took me up to one of the so-called courtrooms where they hoped to breathe life into a controversy before a magistrate Bana Roberts. Immediately when, upon their record, I stood and declared for and on the record that no one may speak for me, nor my trust, nor otherwise, not now, nor ever. Then, when Roberts called the case, I declared, "I agree at this time, upon the court's record, I reserve the right of subrogation of sureties on the bonds per Public Law 7310, House Joint Resolution 192. While I put up my exemption for the bonds, I ask this court to return the bonds to me. In consideration thereof, I will enter a plea of guilty as charged for the defendant so charged. These rights are reserved at UCC 1-207 and UCC 1-301. Is this court of official record and agreement, to which Miss Roberts affirmed she did not understand, to which I responded, I agree at this time upon the courts, and then Miss Roberts said, you've already said that, to which I asked, is this court of official record and agreement? No more was said. I was taken out of the room by the alleged U.S. Marshals. They had no controversy on the record. St. Matthew 5:25. No argument. I was in complete honor, and all was settled, as it had already been settled before I had been brought to Oklahoma. I'm going to pause again on the top of page 23. All right, continuing at the top of page 23, 7. On the October 3rd, 2007, I was taken in chains early in the morning by Oklahoma County Sheriff persons to the federal courthouse in Oklahoma City. After sitting in a holding cell all day, I was taken into a so-called courtroom for a Ferretta hearing, as if I were seeking a court order for representing the defendant trust, as if to say myself. When I made it clear all was settled, nothing in controversy, nothing to represent, Timothy DeGusti, DBA as judge, ran out of the room without adjournment. I learned it was DeGusti who had called for the hearing. I did not fall for the scam. 8. The matter was becoming impossible for their agenda, as they had no jurisdiction where there was no controversy. Finally, early in 2008, they decided to carry on a bogus show trial. Every time I was dragged into their sham courtroom, I made a declaration for and on the record, no one may speak for me, my trust, nor anything whatsoever related thereto. Number 9. The day they had planned for their bogus show trial, some U.S. Marshals types came up to the holding cells with an offer of street clothes, a trick for presuming I, Clayton, and Barry were accepting and entering their contract in their trade and commerce scam. We all refused the offer for cause without dishonor. They let us sit for hours, then came back with different clothes and a song and dance about they were from them, not the court, as if that made any difference. We should accept them, offer for contract. We, in good faith, again refused for cause. Finally, they decided to forcefully drag us into their bogus show trial in orange jail clothes. The whole constructive fraud, a lie. Romans 4:15. Where there is no law, there can be no transgression. The bogus show trial acted out. The ignorant so-called jurors voted guilty on 2 of 3 charges. All a huge lie, and not 1 in 10,000 potential jurors has a clue, and they are not in any way held accountable for errors nor bad acts. Number 10. During the next several weeks, I prepared a writ of habeas corpus for convening hearing our one Supreme Court and for the Oklahoma County. When called, which I did, the bankrupt corporate actors have no claim, pen hollow at all, versus Doan's administrators against the private living people, and when called for. If anyone has a claim against the demandant, me, let him speak now or forever hold his peace. You could have heard a pin drop. No claims. Next move was to turn to the U.S. Marshals and command, you are now on my bond. Take me to the exit and my liberty. But DeGusti, the so-called judge in fiction, to avert his crime being entered on the record, nodded, and without warning nor cause, a marshal shot me in the back with a taser. I was slammed to the floor violently as I screamed involuntarily, and my glasses careened across the floor in front of me toward those seated in the galley. After gathering me and my glasses, the marshals dragged me out of the room and took me to the holding cell. Less than 2 hours later, while I was still trembling, unable to function, the U.S. Marshals strapped a high-voltage shock belt around my waist and dragged me in chains into the same room where the human traffickers had shot me less than 2 hours earlier for another fraudulent attempt for forcing me into their unconscionable contract of usurious suretyship, violation of the word, Proverbs 6:1-5. A bogus federal bond scheme sentence. When asked for allocution, I stood for reaffirmation of the full settlement of record. I agree. As inserted herein, item 6 immediately above, under threat of another high-voltage shock, I was not allowed to complete the reaffirmation of the firm settlement. Matthew 5:25. Thus closure of all liability, discharge of all against me. UCC 3603-77, Statute 682. As amended, their record affirms the entire matter settled and discharged. That done, they chained me up and took me back to total isolation in the Grady County Detention Center jail. 11. The first evening back to Grady County after being shot with a high voltage, I tried to diary some notes of the details of the day. I could not write and found it difficult to even think in a congruent manner. I finally gave up at 9 p.m. CST and, very exhausted, fell asleep. 12. On the 17th of April 2008, in isolation, Grady County Jail, I issued a writ notice via our 1 Supreme Court, Grady County, affirming record of all particulars of writ of habeas corpus hearing of the 7th day of the 4th month in the year of our Redeemer 2008, served under triple seals of all employees of the bankrupt United States at the U.S. Courthouse in Oklahoma City, with demand for electronic file order. And on the 18th day of the 4th month at or about 10:30 a.m. CST, Jennifer Schwartz, Special Agent FBI, unidentified person, allegedly Special Agent FBI and the U.S. Marshal, who had shot and assaulted me, made an attempt at intimidating me, related the writ notice. They failed, and they could not escape quickly enough. 13. Early morning on a day late in the 5th month, May, of the year of our Redeemer 2008, I was bound in chains and abused with several others to the Will Rogers International Airport and placed on a large rent-a-plane passenger jet and flown without travel papers to a location near Pine Knot, Kentucky, USP McCreary, where they had found me 10 months earlier. I was bused to McCreary by late in the afternoon, where employees for BOP who remembered prepared to house me in the general population. Readied with my property in green military duffel bags, I began down the hall headed for the general population housing, when an officer yelled at me, "Come back here, Landers. You can't go out there. We don't know what is wrong. You're not designated here. You're not designated anywhere. You're going to the hole." I retorted, "Don't I have to be designated to go to the hole?" He barked, "You're going to the hole." I was held in the hole with no access to telephone, no mail service until the last weeks in July 2008, when early in the morning I and my property were loaded in a BOP van, and 2 BOP officers started driving me to destiny unknown to me, and later on the trip only toward Terre Haute, Indiana. I was not being moved with any transfer papers nor U.S. Marshals, just information that I was actually headed to FCI Terre Haute. When we arrived, it seemed as if no one knew what was going on. Finally, after some confusion, we went in via a sally port, then went up to a door and knocked at the building near the sally port. When the door opened, I was asked in by a man and a woman whom I would learn were the case manager, F. Timothy Coleman, an alleged intelligence research specialist in this place they called the CMU, Communication Management Unit, or CTU, Counterterrorism Unit, or by some Guantanamo North. That was nearly 9 years ago. I have been in this building ever since. This is my 9th year. I have been told I will never leave CMU. I would never leave CMU. Guantanamo North, Section 5. A. An unregulated torture system never authorized by Congress, nor could such a place ever lawfully be authorized by Congress, nor any other legitimate entity. Lawlessness under cover of alleged fighting terror. I have seen the entire population turn over 3.5 times in the 9 years that I have suffered this unlawful illegal trespass on mine and the rights of others, not the least of which are the rights of our family and loved ones. 1. In the first 90 days for the legitimately pursuing remedy and relief from this unlawful treatment of me and my family and friends, F. Timothy Coleman, unilaterally with no lawful authority of any kind, cut me off from writing my wife Dana and my power of attorney, and Pastor Ralph Leo indefinitely. He alleged my wife is not my wife and refused to rely on the well-settled record of our legitimate marriage, all unlawful felony trespasses on myself and others. 2. A pattern of imposing sanctions with no legitimate authority as willed by people who have no authority of any kind whatsoever. A concentration camp environment with no real order of things whatsoever. And intentional blocking of all avenues of redress of grievances without any means of securing legal lawful help outside. There is no required legal nor lawful documentary authority on file with these outlaws for even allowing us into this prison. None. 3. Of necessity, this outline leaves out numerous seriously incriminating facts and evidence. The building I have lived in for the last nearing 9 years was condemned. It is understood over 20 years ago. It was vacated as the federal death row facility years before it was made into a CMU CTU in November of 2006. When I was first here, we had a leaking roof that poured in every time it would rain. It was not fit for a doghouse, much less for forcing people to live in it. It was so bad that we had to elevate the lockers with 16-ounce styrofoam cups as legs to avert the water from damaging the contents when it rained, no matter how little. Some bunks could not be used as the leaks ran water across them. Ceilings dripped everywhere and the paint fell everywhere. Toxic mold resides under the loose paint and in cracks and numerous places, too many to spell out in this outline. 4. Such oppression and lawless abuses of people in a human trafficking concentration camp crime spree as this would make Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, etc. proud. So proud. Pray for not only those who are suffering such abuses, but for numerous people who are caught up in working in this outrageous crime scene, that somehow our Lord might be merciful and redeem them before it is too late. Conclusion. If the American people think the German peoples and those who were responsible for so many wrongs in Nazi-occupied Europe should be ashamed, best they get ready to assume the responsibility for all the lies, murders, torture, robbery that is and has been done in the name of the United States. Pray without ceasing and begin repentance for such evil right under our noses. I hope and pray that all is without delay exposed, and that the American people can peacefully and righteously with honor do what is right to turn from these undescribable wicked ways. By the grace of the Word, your faithful servant, Rex Russell Dean Landers, servant of the Word, John 1:1-14, authorized signatory, June the 28th, 2017, St. Matthew 5:43-45. That is absolutely a horrific story that we just read from Rex Russell Dean Landers, the last remaining Montana Freeman. I think we need to do everything we can to get his story published to the American people. It's just makes me want to cry when I think about what this country has done to this man and what they're still continuing to do even unto this day. If you want to download the PDF file that I just read, it's 26 pages. It's on year Y-E-A-R of Jubilee, Jubile.com. Click on the Russell page and also take that PDF file and spread it far and wide. There's no copyright on any of this. Just take it and send it to whoever might be interested. It's absolutely horrific what they have done to these Montana Freemen. I think Leroy Schweitzer died in prison, and we want to help get the word out as best we can. In closing, the last line of peaceful defense between a tyrannical government and the defendant is jury nullification. Educate yourself about jury nullification at fija.org, F-I-J-A.org.